Okay, what the video is going to be about is an introduction to the European Citizens Initiative on media pluralism. Now, I don't think I need to explain too much what an ECI is. An ECI is a European Citizens Initiative, and it allows 1 million citizens coming from at least 7 member states to propose legislation directly to the European Union. It's a new innovation that was brought about by the Lisbon Treaty, and it started being technically an option since April 2011. It's an interesting innovation for us because it's the first example of transnational participatory democracy, and it's a procedure that empowers European citizens to push, to initiate a legislative process directly at the European Commission level. So far we've had one successful initiative that has managed to collect 1 million signatures, almost 2 million as a matter of fact. It's been discussed earlier today, and it was the ECI that demands a stop to directives suggesting the need to privatize water and sanitation services in member states. The ECI hasn't finished yet its formal process of having its signatures verified by the different member states, and then its defense in front of the College of Commissioners of the European Commission. That will take a few months to be completed, but nonetheless it has already achieved political results. Commissioner Barnier, who is the Commissioner for the Internal Market, has responded to the successful completion of the 1 million target by reassuring the promoters of the initiative that in the upcoming directive on concessions that the European Commission is working on, privatization of water will not be included. So in a certain sense, even before initiating the legislative process that is behind an ECI, a successful ECI has already had an impact in the policy dialogue and in the policy making of the European Union. That's hopeful for us because it means that ECIs may actually have some impact, and what we want to achieve with our ECI is certainly also some impact. Impact on progressive media reform at EU level. Giovanni is going to be speaking more in detail about the legal background and the specific requests that our ECI makes. But very broadly speaking, we want to get to a situation where minimum standards exist across the European Union that avoid dangerous concentration of mediatic power or dangerous concentrations in the advertisement market, or dangerous conflict of interests between political, economical and mediatic positions from appearing and from being tolerated by national and European institutions. This calls for much greater transparency on ownership. It calls for much more clearly defined targets for what is considered a concentrated market where dominant players have undue influence over the freedom of the media landscape, and it calls for a much more structured monitoring of the health of the media landscape in individual member states on the part of the European institutions, and a sanctioning naturally when this monitoring comes up with a red light in some national scenarios. But again, I think this will be further discussed in a few minutes time. What I really wanted to talk to you about is why we started what might sound a somewhat crazy endeavor of going throughout Europe to mobilize 1 million citizens to make them sign an initiative that says that media reform should be top of the agenda for European institutions in a time when we all know priorities in the European Union might be perceived to be other than the question of media independence and media pluralism. We all know, and we've been discussing it this morning, and we discuss it endlessly, that the situation of the media in individual member states of the European Union is actually quite appalling, and it's actually worsening very fast. You've heard earlier today discussions on Bulgaria, on Turkey, on the United Kingdom. Obviously, we don't have to discuss what is happening in this country, and I don't have to remind you what has happened, is happening in the country I come from, which is Italy. The point we wanted to stress, however, is that this is not simply a sum of national problems that merely have an impact on the national dimension of the country where a certain violation of media freedom is experienced. But actually this is a directly European issue, a directly transnational problem that should be tackled also through the mobilization of transnational lawmaking and transnational political initiative. Why is the situation of media a European problem? For at least 3 reasons. The first reason is that a situation such as the one we have today, where Mr. Berlusconi can get away with a near dominant control of the media and the political landscape in a country such as Italy without this situation leading to any formal sanctioning from international and especially European institutions, is a situation of free-for-all. It's a situation that causes a domino effect, where worsening legislation in one country indirectly leads to the worsening of legislation in another country. If Berlusconi gets away with it, then why should Orban not try to do something even more mischievous, even more Machiavellian than what Berlusconi has achieved in Italy a few years back? If Berlusconi and Orban get away with it, then why should Bulgarian or Romanian media moguls not do all that is in their power to access political control or to control political power in order to further their economic interests? So on and so forth. There is a domino effect that needs to be stopped, and that backstop to a domino effect that is transnational effectively is a backstop that should come from a transnational dimension, that of the European institutions. The second problem why the situation of media is a European problem is because European countries no longer merely represent themselves, they also represent Europe in the way they behave, and they represent what the European Union symbolizes to the rest of the world. And if the message passes that the European Union doesn't care about media because Berlusconi, because Orban can do whatever they like, then Mr. Erdogan was very right a couple of years ago when confronted with the situation of the media in Turkey and how this could impact the bid to enter the European Union. He very candidly responded, "Oh, but that doesn't matter, the European Union doesn't do media." Is that true? Is that the case? Is the European Union willing to pass the message that candidate countries, neighboring countries, countries where development programs of the European Union are being run, should receive the message that it doesn't matter, that the media is not something that the European Union cares about? The final element why this is a European problem is the issue of interdependence. We all know how interdependent member states are. Earlier today, someone was raising the fear of Portugal that Italy might, through the current government crisis, be leading to indirectly further problems for the debt of Portugal. We all know how important media is for a transparent, for a functioning, for an efficient political system in each and every member state. If we let European member states run into semi-authoritarian tendencies, the chances are that semi-authoritarian regimes usually cause economic havoc. And this economic chaos is an economic chaos that is going to be interdependently have an impact on other member states as well. There is something that is a union of national governments, and these governments need to have a joint trust, and they need to abide to certain common democratic principles. The question of media is obviously also a democratic question, and we've discussed it earlier today this morning. It's not just the regulation of a market, as you would be regulating the mozzarella market. It's the regulation of something that represents the basis for democracy. And this is another reason why we like very much the idea of a European level initiative that demands progressive media reform at European level to defend something that is at the basis of the democratic functioning of our continent. We're very used now with the European Union sanctioning budget deficits in individual member states, the famous 3% rule. We think that the message should pass that worse than budget deficits are deficits of freedoms and deficits of liberty and democratic deficits in national member states as well as at the European level. And this initiative calls on the European Union to guarantee that democratic deficits and deficits of liberty will be treated no less strongly than deficits in budgets or deficits in the fiscal position of individual countries. The method to do so is also very interesting, and this is the last point, and I conclude on this point. The method of achieving media reform at EU level through a European Citizens Initiative means rallying 1 million plus citizens from throughout Europe to demand a legislative change that concerns them all. This is important for democracy. It's important because it requires the construction of pan-European citizens' mobilization that jointly, that unitedly takes up the meaning of European citizenship and the meaning of European political citizenship to demand concrete and substantial changes in the makeup of the European Union. And this is important for media, actually, because mobilizing 1 million citizens for media reform means that the discussion around media, the discussion on the importance of media freedom, of media pluralism, needs to get out of rooms such as this one and of conferences of experts or of academic circles. It needs to become something that concerns and interests the average citizen on the street. This is what the ECI will try to do through a creative campaigning strategy, through a captivating message online and offline strategy, but it's what we need to make sure that what we tell each other is actually coherently present in the daily priorities of citizens who are outside of this room. That also means that the independence of the media is not the concern of groups that simply fight for the independence of the media as such, media group, journalist group, professional associations, but becomes the priority of groups that fight for other causes, minority groups, groups that fight for the rights of Roma people, groups that fight for the right of migrants. And the message that we need to send as a campaign is that if you want to protect the rights of women, if you want to protect the rights of sexual minorities, the only way you have of doing that is through a free and pluralistic media which guarantees a correct representation for your cause and guarantees access to the media, to civil society, and the concerns that civil society is making emerge. So it's a campaign for media reform, it's a campaign for democracy, and it's a campaign to put media change and media pluralism on top of the agenda of the people who are walking right now on that street in front of us. Allegedly, it's not very many, but if we go in Central West, I'm sure we can find more. Thank you.
Well, I tried to mention in the morning that our European Citizens Initiative has a vision, which means, or an ideology, that we do not try to fight against the European institutions and the European elites, but we think that we are in alliance with many politicians, officials, and experts, legal experts, and others. And I'm just wondering whether actually Lorenzo and Giovanni, you agree with this idea. We never discussed it so deeply. But I mean, in case the European Commission has changed a little bit its attitude to the media situation in the member states in general, as both of you talked about it, especially Joe, and there are arguments regarding the competence of the European Union, and even the economic situation shows that there is a need for more media pluralism. So can we really trust in our initiative that it might be successful, even if we know that the Commission approved the initiative, but that's the first step. But what comes next? Certainly we know that some European politicians really support our initiative, like Martin Schulz, who signed it, or you mentioned Renate Weber's report, where I remember she explicitly speaks about our initiative. So I just would like to ask you whether these are just realistic hopes, or at the end something might happen which at the end will ruin our hopes when we get there at all.
Yes, so and it's also a follow-up on the end of the other session, because it seems it's part of the issue is that whether we see the European Union as a structure where we can and should move towards establishing some federalist rules to safeguard fundamental values like freedom of the press, or we don't see it that way. And I think we should do that, and obviously our initiative does that. And so my question related to that is that, and it's related to István's question as well, that we know that the European Commission proposed in the draft of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive some sort of mandatory rule to safeguard the sufficient independence of the media bodies, the media councils in the member states, and it didn't go through. So I wonder whether what was the reason for it in your view? Was it that some influential member states wanted to keep it for a national decision-making process, or worse, some member states, influential member states, so that they better keep their control? And if the second, then it's unfortunately hypocritical to criticize the Hungarian government, although of course the Hungarian government deserves full criticism of how it controls the media council. So I wonder, how do you see those strange developments in the European Union that sort of, in my view, and I close with this, turned the Audiovisual Media Services Directive into a kind of a disaster, because while the directive was extended the scope of the common European media regulation in terms of content, regulating content, at the same time it failed to include what the Commission proposed, rules that would safeguard that the bodies that implement the extended regulation of content should be certainly independent enough when they do that. Thanks.
Thank you. And William?
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the connection between media pluralism and media freedom. It struck me that Mr. Meloni spoke about the centre in Florence as the centre for media pluralism, and he didn't actually say media freedom. This, I think, was quite significant, because I observed that most of the focus has been on media pluralism. Some would say this is in danger of being a cop-out, an escape. It is easier to talk about media pluralism than media freedom. It's easier for the European Commission to listen as well. But I perhaps ask you or your Italian colleague. Actually, I think you, Mr. Meloni, actually began by saying that the Citizens' Initiative started in Italy because of the problems of media concentration. So perhaps you'd like to say, what is the connection between the concentration of media in the Italian case or others, and the impact on media freedom? And since Elder has done the study about competencies, it's not a trick question, but it's a tricky question. Perhaps you'd like to make a comment.
Maybe extremely briefly, I think Giovanni addressed most of the points. But on the Italian situation, perhaps I just want to add one element. And I was asked, actually, I was with Bear in Denver, the Media Reform Congress, a few months ago, and I was asked why the Italian Parliament didn't pass any legislation to avoid a figure such as Berlusconi reaching such a level of concentration and of control of the media and advertising market. And my response was quite easy, and that was that Berlusconi controlled the Parliament, so he wasn't going to be making any laws against his own interest. And this is one consideration that brought us to take the European dimension as a serious dimension, because very often at national level there is an overlap of political, mediatic and economical interest that makes it very difficult to initiate progressive media reform at a merely national level. Italy we know, but even the situation of the United Kingdom, it's taken quite a scandal to get the House of Commons to begin doing something about the dependence of several MPs from Murdoch's control of media discourses or public discourses in the country. And without that scandal, perhaps political forces in the UK wouldn't have dared do anything about it, but would have just lingered on in their subservience to the interests of the Murdoch empire, which is also what I would say to Istvan. I start from the presupposition that the European political class today, by which I mean the political class of national governments and the political class of Brussels, is the probably most abysmal and petty-minded political class since the time of Marie Antoinette. And I take that for granted. There is a political class that is petty-minded, is fearful and self-interested. There is a European Commission that is fearful of what member states say or do. Member states that are fearful of what strong economical or mediatic moguls say or do. We have a European Commission which lacks in any level of ambition to bring this continent out of the corner it's placed itself into. We have a European Commission and a group of member states which lack the imagination, actually, of performing anything that goes beyond the administration of the status quo. And our initiative is actually quite courageous. It's quite open-minded, and it's in the interest of all, and it's against the interests of many. Actually, it's against the interests of oligarchs and all those who survive and thrive in this hybrid system of corruption and maladministration. Will it work? I think so. I think it will work precisely because it's a courageous and ambitious initiative, and that's a message that we need to make pass also to our citizens out there, actually, that this is an initiative to say no to many things that they dislike and that their leaders are doing nothing about, and instead to say yes to a European Union and a Hungary and an Italy, which is based around principles of real and radical democracy and participation of everyone equally to the definition of the common good. My understanding, when it comes specifically to the process of ECI, is that the European Commission and the Media Task Force is actually quite happy that this ECI exists. And more than one person in Brussels has repeated to me that European institutions are actually wanting and in need of a civil society push to reach the level of audacity necessary for them to begin taking seriously regulation of media freedom and media pluralism at EU level. So I think we have more than one ally. I think we have very many allies in very many European and national institutions, and they're happy that we are their allies. It's now up to us to first get there, to get the 1 million, and then I think they won't get us away until we get what we want with this initiative.